What's up YouTube, Dal here from Zephyr War Games, and today I am bringing you a concept for Sky Strikers post Banlist. That's right, the deck that just will not die is getting stronger and stronger each Banlist, especially with future support coming out for it as well. Now, as a disclaimer, this is a concept, and what I mean by the concept is do not net deck this, it is not perfected, but what I'm going to show you in this list is loads of different variant cards that you can play in the deck that can actually help you in the balanced format. So with all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell, and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more upcoming content. I'm also going to explain each card and why we are playing it at the ratios that we are, or why you would even consider including it in the deck. So we start off with Triple Ray. Ray is the main core card of the deck. Her float effect is just absolutely ridiculous. Even her quick effect, like all of Ray's effects are insane. So, quick effect, tribute this card, special on a Sky Striker Ace monster from your extra deck to the extra monster zone. So what that can do is basically during the battle phase, attack with Ray, anyone that's new to Sky Strikers, attack with Ray, still in the battle phase, quick effect, tag out into Hayate, Foolish Burials, engage, and then in the main phase 2, you turn Hayate into Kagari and then add that engage back. It's just insane. If that wasn't enough, if a face-up Sky Striker Ace Link monster you control is destroyed by battle or leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect, special on his card back. So constantly, your Link monster leaves, Ray comes back. Ray can then tag out and go into Kagari, which will be the stronger one. It can go into Kana, which stops one of your opponent's monsters from attacking. It can go Hayate to attack directly. It can also go Shizuku to search in the end phase. The card is nuts and busted in all beliefs, but then again, engage is just as crazy. Then we do have the one Rose. I don't feel you need it more than one. I do see some people play it too, but for me personally, one is enough. So if you control a Sky Striker Ace monster, or if Sky Striker Ace monster is normal or specialed, except itself, you get to special on this card from the hand. If an opponent's monsters in the extra monster zone is destroyed by battle or leaves the field because of your card effect, while this card is in the graveyard, you get to special summon it back. Then you can negate the effects of one face-up monster your opponent controls until the end of this turn. Now, it's more so it's just an additional extender, and how Rose can then help you get into Zeke, and it will also be very helpful in getting you into the new striker cards when we officially get them. Moving on to the hand traps, because these are the only monsters that you play that are actually effective on the board apart from the hand traps. These hand traps can be interchangeable to do whatever the format kind of takes shape. If Droll is more effective in the main, it will come back in. The reason I've gone with Ghost Bell is going to be insane against Branded and of course Kashtira's. Being able to hit stuff like Birth, which is constantly going to be able to keep going. You can also hit Runics that are still going to be around, believe it or not, because they didn't really get touched on the ban list at all. It's also just a very good card that kind of helps stop if the gimmick puppet lock is still being played. It can also deal with stuff like Albion and Lubellion. It's very, very important to stop your opponent getting into stuff like Dragoon, because that ultimately becomes an auto win for them against strikers, which is very, very tricky. Then got Double Ash. This is just to kind of show you the range of what you can play, and Double Ghost Mourner. This can very easily be Veiler, but the reason I went with Mourner is the fact that it doesn't have to go to the graveyard. One big weakness of this deck, apart from Eradicator, which I know a lot of you are going to talk about, and if you are constantly playing against Labyrinths, then of course you need to adapt the deck and be like, right, okay, I'm always going to be facing this lab player at locals. I need to be able to play around the Eradicator. It's very tricky to do so, but in order to do that, you kind of need to start adapting your spell count and start going for more trap count, because as you'll soon see, our spell count is pretty much 2/3 of the entire deck. The last card, this is just a concept option for you. You do not have to play this at all. This was kind of something that bounced between there can only be one, bumping any of the hand traps up to 3, and I kind of went with Lord of the Heavenly Prisons. The reason I put this in here is I do think it's really, really funny. You never actually summon it. Like, you can do if you want to, but the idea would be that you're constantly just revealing Lord of the Heavenly Prisons, and it protects your entire back row. Keep in mind your back row is going to be constantly reset now that we have 2 multi-roll. You also, it means that your opponent's always going to try and target that engage to destroy it, and you're just like, yeah, no, it's all protected by Lord. It also means that you're kind of forcing your opponent, if they can't destroy your back row, to destroy your front row, and your front row is always going to be a striker ace monster, which 9 out of 10 you're always hoping is going to be coming off of the back of a Ray, and Ray is one of the most annoying cards around. Now, of course, if Bestials are heavily played at your locals, again, you need to adapt your strategy. If Bestials come back into the format, again, you need to be a little bit wary, because The one downside of Ray is unfortunately she is a dark, so she can get absolutely sniped every single time. Keep it in mind as well though that they need to snipe it early, they can't snipe it in response because I believe Ray just comes back to the board. Moving on to the spells, triple Widow Anchor, like the deck is near enough back to the way it wants to be. Triple Linkage. So linkage is your way of being able to, if you don't open up drones, you don't open up Ray, you can still get into a Kagari, you can still get into a Suzuku, you name it. This card's actually insanely good for the deck. I really, really liked it when it was first announced for it. It's rare that you're ever going to resolve the second effect because it needs you to have a... so if you do, you special on a Sky Striker Ace monster from your extra deck, and annoyingly, Zeke cannot be summoned that way, so keep that in mind. You're only ever going to be able to get Kana, Kagari, Suzuku, or Hayate. However, the second effect is if you have at least one light and one dark Sky Striker Ace monster on the field and or in the graveyard, the summoned monster gains 1,000 attack. Now, that's only possible when you get Zeke or Ray or Rose into the graveyard. Now, considering Rose is your only real light target, that's where it gets a little bit tricky, so I wouldn't rely on the second effect as much. It's more so important that its first effect is if you control no monsters in the main monster zone, you can't special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn after this card resolves except Sky Striker Ace monsters, but you send one other card you control to the graveyard, and if you do, special summon a Sky Striker Ace. Now, this is the reason that I don't like Nibiru in the main deck, and even in the extra deck, the side deck, I'm not completely sold on it. Now, a lot of ways your opponent is going to try and out your board or block the board, as good old Sky Strikers were always stocked with, was something like a Kaiju. And the only way that you could get rid of that card on the board is if you already have Area 0 set up. Now, I know there are ways to get to it, but if you don't have Area 0 before they Kaiju you or before you nib your opponent, you've not got a way of constantly getting rid of that token, getting rid of that monster in order to continue your plays, because all of your Sky Striker cards are then locked out. So that's why you don't ever really want to summon the Lord of Heavenly Prisons. It's just pretty cool in order to kind of have like a set linkage and a set Widow Anchor, and your opponent can just not deal with them. They can't clear them off until you activate them, and then when you do, you're just going to be able to recycle them with your multi-roll. Now, gracefully back at 2, the annoying card itself, Engage. As if resolving Engage twice in a turn wasn't enough. I mean, back in the old day, you could probably resolve it like 4 times. It's mental. But with this, you can now ultimately resolve it an additional 2 times. Because the idea is you can go Engage into, well, the meme back in the day was Engage, search out any card, and then draw it into Engage. And you go Engage again. The card is absolutely mental. It's a Pot of Greed with a designated search. There's no wonder why this was a 1. I'm surprised they brought it back to 2, but it's obviously designed to help hype up the new striker cards coming. Then, of course, we've got 2 Area 0, and I'm also going to show you the power card in the form of the Terraforming at this point, because technically you now play 3 of the field spell, not that you didn't before. But the idea is as soon as you've got the field spell set up, it's one of them cards that your opponent never really wants to deal with because it just gives you instant access to a Ray. So you target one other card you control, excavate the top 3 cards of your deck, and if you do, you get to add an excavated Sky Striker card from it and shuffle the rest into the deck. Then if you excavated a Sky Striker card, send this targeted card, or send the target card to the graveyard. If this card in the field zone is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can special summon a Sky Striker Ace monster from the deck. Now, the fact that this is so annoying and busted and really, really painful is the fact that it doesn't have to send the card that you targeted. And what I mean by that is, if I've got a preset Shark Cannon for the previous turn, and I go, okay, Area 0, target the Shark Cannon, I can chain the Shark Cannon, take my opponent's monster, banish my opponent's monster, it doesn't matter, and Area 0 then still resolves as much as possible. And it's just like, yo, really? There's no negative to what I'm trying to do here. That being said, you now have complete control over dealing with the Area 0. Like, the combo is obviously Area 0, do whatever you need to do, and then multi-roll can pop the Area 0, gives that additional effect that your opponent cannot respond to your spell effects. Not just Sky Striker effects, spell effects, which is really, really annoying, and constantly keeps recycling your graveyard. Shout out to Donald, who plays a funny tech. It's not something I would advise playing, but he plays Imperial Iron Wall. And the reason that's so funny in a fun deck like this, like if you build it in a fun way, is the fact that you constantly keep recycling your stuff because they never get banished. So multi-roll lets you set in the end phase Sky Striker cards from the graveyard with different names up to number of Sky Striker cards you activated with different names that turn. So you constantly keep recycling. It's absolutely mental. And the fact that your opponent cannot respond to your spell cards activated this turn is insane. So Might roll back at 2. Yes, you could arguably play it at 3 if you want to, but 2 is more than enough. I wouldn't want to really be putting a third, because once you've got 1, the only time you want to get to the second is if your opponent outs the first. And ultimately, it's like, okay, well, if they're not going to out the first, I'm not going to worry about it. And if they do out the first, it's like, okay, well, I now have open season in order to go and get the second one. So there's no real time when I'm like, I really need a third one. So keeping that in mind. Carrying on, we do play 2 shark cannon and 1 afterburners alongside the 1 drone and of course the 1 eagle booster. Now another card in the main I'm not completely set on as of yet, and the reason I'm not set on it in the main is because until bestials become a factor, if you're going to be activating triple tactic thrust, it's better for you as a go second card than it is as a go first card. Yes, going first, it can give me access straight away to engage if I want it to, but the fact of the matter is if my opponent does not control a monster, I have to set the engage and I can't do anything with it. And because I'm not main decking any normal traps that this card can set and give me a advantage of, and the reason of that is because I'm not playing Imperm, and I'll show you what I'm playing for that in a second. But it's kind of a questionable card, and again, this is where the space of adaptation comes into play. Is you can up your hand trap count, you can go to Tikaboo if you want to, entirely up to you. So the card that I'm playing instead of Imperm is Double Forbidden Chalice. Now again, the reason I've gone with this, yes, there are downsides of Imperm, there's plus sides of Imperm, there's downsides of Chalice and plus sides of Chalice. The reason I went with this is just a very nice go second card that can also be used during the damage step, which is really, really important when your opponent's trying to get rid of some of your cards. But also it's a spell card, so it helps increase that count of 3 in the graveyard, because you're going to want to start getting the additional effects, mainly of engage, like searching and drawing is just busted. Another card that I am playing that you could arguably consider playing at 3 if you were to put Nibiru in the deck, and that is Enemy Controller. And the reason I've got this in here is if my opponent feels that they can just give me a token, because they're worried about stuff like Kashtiras being in a thing, a lot of players will start to try and give cards to their opponent's board in order to deal with it. Yes, if we're able to get into a Ray, we can link it off into a Zeke and continue to try and make our plays, but only you don't want to rely on that. So being able to have something like an enemy controller to not only kind of deal with your opponent's board, but also a way that if you've got your own Ray on the board, or if you've got a Rose on the board, or if you've got your own monster on the board, you can get rid of it and then choose to take their card. And then ultimately, you can then continue your link climb. So what you're doing is if they give you a Kaiju and they set up their own monster, you can activate enemy controller, and then that will allow you to tribute and target as cost. So straight away, you've cleared your monster off. So even if they negate the enemy controller and you threaten to take their Baron, for example, and they go, well, I'm not giving you the Baron because your Baron can then just pop and start continuing to build. I'm actually going to negate the enemy controller. You've already got rid of the monster you've left on the board. So all of your striker cards are now open, and you've basically traded 1 card for their negate and the Kaiju that's blocking your zones. And then the last, I've got a lot of normal one-offs, and these can all come off the back of Thrust. So you've got your Talent, your Dark Hole, Goblin, Rotor, and then of course Called by the Grave. The reason I'm only playing 1 of Dark Hole and 1 of Talent is, again, Dark Hole is just one of them cards to help try and clear your board off. You don't have to. And the reason I've got the main deck of Talents is I want to be able to have an out to something like a Dragoon, because I do feel that my opponent, if I'm up against Branded and my opponent sees I'm playing Striker, they just make Dragoon and I'm like, okay, cool, I don't really have an out to that in my entire deck. Whereas if I've got Talents and I've got Thrust that can get me to Talents, and I've got so many cards that my opponent's going to want to try and negate with Dragoon, just stealing that Dragoon and then linking it off is very, very important. And heck, what's even funnier is if you're able to get a Ray to the board and you link it off into the Dark Charmer, that's very, very funny. Because then I believe you can even bring back the Dragoon, which is really cool. So that's it for the main deck. Like I said at the start, this is a concept. Some of the cards are staples in the forms of the Rays and the Engages and the Widow Anchors. Some of the other cards like the Hand Traps, the Enemy Controllers, the Frost, the Chalices, they're all down to your local environment. They're your flex spots. They're the cards you can go, okay, well, I see where you're going with this, but it doesn't really fit my playstyle, or I don't have access to these. I'm going to interchange it and make it a bit more control, adding in Tikaboo. I want more hand traps, so add in Imperms and Veilers. And you want main deck back row hates, you can go for Evenlies, you can go for Dusters, you name it. Moving on to the edge of deck, of course, we are playing triple Kagari, like, yikes. Engage, Kagari, add back, engage. Oh, whoa, I drew engage. Engage again. Engage 3 times in a turn? Sure. Triple Shizuku, again, pretty straightforward on this one. I pretty much max out on the 3 main ones, the Hayate, the Shizuku, and the Kagari. I know Shizuku has an alternate art, so it'd be cool to see that. I wonder if Hayate is going to get one as well. And then we do play the 1 Kana. I don't think you really need to play Kana at more than 1, but you can do if you want to. Arguably, you could put Hayate to 2, but like just Hayate being able to attack directly and then Foolish Burial the engage gives you direct access to it, ready to set up your plays going forward. And then continuing on, the last one we play is the 1 Zeke. Now keep in mind, the reason that this one can't be cheated out with something like linkage is the fact that it has this first line of text that says must be link summoned. So linkage lets you special summon, doesn't technically link summon it. And then for the Charmers, you pretty much choose the Charmers that fit your playstyle and fit the deck. So I've gone with Dark. Obviously, Dark is the most generic one. This is probably the first one you're going to choose, purely because this can be Ray, and then any other card makes Dark. The reason I chose Suwa is for the pure fact that I was like, okay, well, I don't really want to be using Suzuku. You kind of want to leave Suzuku to the end phase. The arguably one is you could use Kagari, so you could go for Hayate. Not Hayate, sorry. Hita, the Fire Charmer. But then I was like, well, if I make Kana, I make my opponent can't attack, and then I use Kana plus anything, gives me into Asura. And then the idea is that off the back of that, Asura lets me revive from the graveyard and go from there. Both of these can then move into Selene. Selene can technically bring back any spellcaster, so as long as it can go into defense. So that's where Veiler becomes more effective. That's where you're going to want to consider Veiler. That's the one thing that I don't have in the deck, which is something that is probably missing, because you're going to want to bring back that. So if you're playing Veiler, Selene's a good option. If you're not, then this is where it becomes your 3rd Charmer card, and then you've basically got the balance of everything. So that's your Fire Charmer. And then the last card is your Mac Daddy access code. This is just one of the ones where you make access code at the end of the turn. Access code is going to have so many different attributes in the graveyard by the time you make it. There'll definitely be like a fire, a water, a wind, and then it's up to you on how else you've made it. If you go to Selene route, then obviously you've got a light. If you go the dark route, like usually what you're going to be doing is you'll go Ray with Kagari. You tag out Kagari into Shizuku, Shizuku into Hayate, and then you link that with Ray, goes into Dark. Darks brings back from the graveyard. Dark can go into Selene, and then you go into Access Code. So the Access Code is a 5/3, and it's got like 7 different attributes in the graveyard, and just go Banish Pop, Banish Pop, Banish Pop, Banish Pop. But again, if you don't have access to Access Code, then you're probably going to be going more control-based, and that's where you go for Tikaboo. That's where you can kind of utilize the Hayate, just poke and go kind of play, and everything else from there. So that's it for the profile. I hope this has given you an idea on the build that you want to make. Like I said at the start, and I'll say it again, I'll keep repeating it, because I guarantee you I'll get a comment that's like, oh, this is a bit all over the place. Why are there like loads of 2-ofs? I've already said, it's a concept. This is to give you an idea of some of the cards that I know not a lot of people are actually going to showcase for you, and cards that you can go, oh, okay, I didn't think of Lord in the Heavenly Prison, or, oh, okay, I like enemy control. That's another way to kind of deal with a board block and extend further. So it's definitely something to kind of keep in the back of your mind. I definitely feel that strikers are going to be seeing a lot more play. I feel a lot of striker players are going to come out of the woodwork and kind of put this deck back together now that Engage is now at 2. Not to mention the future support to see where this deck will go from there. But for now, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. Till next time, guys, as absolutely always, stay safe and, of course, happy dueling.